Hello to everybody here in the room and to those who are watching from wherever you are around the world online. We have our last in-person session of the day, a panel discussion about looking ahead to COP27, the critical UN climate summit that's coming up in Sharm el-Sheikh in November this year, and really is setting the tone for events in the climate change world, or in the world of climate change. So thank you to our distinguished guests for their time, and also to the audience here for your attention in what is a pivotal time for geopolitics and climate change. Here with us in the room is Dr. Rania Al-Mashat. She's the Minister for International Cooperation in Egypt, which is, of course, the host country for the next summit. We also have Mafalda Duarte, who runs the Climate Investment Funds with $10.5 billion in hand. She doesn't have a checkbook with her here, but and projects all across the developing world and vast experience. From Paris, we are joined by Laurence Tubiana, who really needs little introduction as the climate champion and architect of the Paris Agreement and chief executive of the European Climate Foundation. And last but not least, of course, we have the COP president himself and UK Cabinet member Alex Sharma. Thank you all for joining. I'll get straight into it, Alec, with you. It would be strange in these times not to start a discussion about what lies ahead on the road to COP without reference to the current tragic events in Ukraine and the resulting energy and food crisis and other implications of that. As you look back, I guess, at COP26, does it seem like we have gone backwards, backsliding already? Even before Ukraine, we had the rise of coal this year. We've had more oil and gas produced. Perhaps could you address that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. And my apologies for not being in person with you, but I've got COVID at the moment, so I'm sparing you that by being in person. Look, I mean, I think if we look back over the past few months, indeed over the last couple of years, the geopolitics has been incredibly challenging. And I mean, we have to acknowledge that even going into COP26, we were in a pretty fractured world. And yet, we did manage to get almost 200 countries to sign up to the Glasgow Climate Pact. And it's because we built the trust, not just the UK, but other friends and partners from around the world worked together to ensure that we got this Glasgow Climate Pact, which I do believe is actually a historic achievement, over the line. Having said that, these are still currently words on a page, right? I mean, we managed to close off the Paris Agreement. We managed to get agreement on phase down of coal by every nation. We managed to get more commitments on finance. We managed to get more commitments for work on adaptation, on loss and damage. But all of that still has to be delivered. And I think there were two great challenges, I think, going into COP26. One was, of course, getting a deal over the line. But I think the even bigger challenge now is on the road to Sharm el-Sheikh to ensure that there is delivery taking place so that people can see that there is, coming out of COP26, very credible actions and delivery that is being put forward by individual nations. I mean, of course, Ukraine is in all our minds, and I just want to sort of put on record here that I think the courageous people of Ukraine are fighting what is an illegal invasion by Putin's regime. Of course, it's absolutely right that supporting them, standing with them at this moment of need is absolutely vital for the global community, and that is front and center of all our minds. But as we saw from the IPCC report that came out last week, unfortunately, climate change hasn't gone away. It's a chronic condition which is continuing to get worse. So have things got more challenging in terms of geopolitics? Yes, they have. Do I think that we can still make progress during this year? Yes, I think we can. And there are a number of areas where we want to try and focus along with partners, particularly with our friends in in Egypt, who have the COP27 presidency. So the first is that every country committed to come forward and revise their 2030 emission reduction targets by the end of this year and align them to the Paris goals if that was necessary. And I think countries fall in different buckets in terms of how you take that work forward, and we're doing that with partners. The second big commitment that was made was on public finance, getting to the 100 billion by 2023. We want to see whether it can go further and faster than that. And of course, there's a commitment made by countries to double the amount of adaptation finance as well to support developing countries by 2025. And we want to make progress on that. But allied with all of that, of course, there was a big focus on the private sector at this COP. I think one of the first COPs where there was a huge focus from the private sector. And we had some really big commitments being made in financing, in committing to clean technology, to clean energy. And what we also want to try and see is those commitments start to come through as well. So yes, the geopolitics is clearly much more challenging, but that doesn't mean that we stand back. I think we should redouble our efforts to make sure we get delivery over this year.
So, not to make you feel more ill than you already do, but can you also address the growing noise that seems to be coming out of the UK Cabinet, that it may lead to some backsliding or a change to the net zero by 2050 pledge, just in the same way as you're urging other countries to stick to the course? Is that, you're not wavering in the Cabinet room?
Well, look, I mean, we have a legal requirement which was, at the end of the day, a Conservative government which put this in place, a legal requirement to go to net zero by 2050. We are certainly not wavering on that. I think what you are seeing, and you've seen the EU has set out its position in terms of how do you cope with reducing and ultimately eliminating dependence on hydrocarbons from Russia. How do you, deliver on that? You're seeing what's coming out of individual EU nations. And of course, in the UK, we have said that we will come out, the Prime Minister said that we will come out with an energy plan. But I think what is really important to understand is that at the end of the day, that doesn't change the fact that we need to get to net zero by 2050. And if you have a look at what we've done in terms of energy transition, we are seen across the world. I mean, last year I went to 35 countries over an 8-month period. I can tell you from talking to governments, they do see the UK as a leader in a clean energy transition. We've got the second biggest offshore wind sector in the world. We want to quadruple that. I think it's possible to go even faster and further on that. You are seeing the commitments being made on nuclear. So I think this is a moment where we accelerate the move towards renewables and ensure that we all stick to our commitments on net zero that we've made. Okay,
so no new oil and gas projects, fracking, that kind of thing?
As I said to you, there is an energy plan that the government will put forward. But I've just said to you, what is it that the UK has done? The reason that we have so little reliance on, Russian gas, I think 4% of our imports in terms of gas from Russia, is because we built a big renewable sector in the UK.
Okay, well, thank you for persevering with me when you're not feeling great. I didn't want to make you feel worse, but Laurence, how are you feeling about the climate agenda as we both look back at COP and also look forward to COP27? Are you feeling that the commitments that were made are in peril? Oh, you're on mute, I'm afraid.
Sorry. Of course, the political situation and the invasion by Russia of Ukraine is a shock for everybody. So we cannot ignore that, and we may come back in the conversation for the need to really, as a Commission, the European Commission proposed to get rid of the imports of oil, gas, and coal from Russia, where Europe is heavily dependent. And so it shows that we should accelerate the move to renewable energy and to our 55% emission reduction by 2030. Well, I see that there was really a mobilization in Glasgow, and the IPCC report that was published this summer and now again this week show no capacity, so no reason to in a way lag behind the commitments that were taken in Glasgow, and they were important, as Alok has said very well. So I do think that, and of course it rely as well of the cooperation between Alok Sharma and the next president of the COP27 to really take countries to their words and really improve their NDC, as Alok said, and I don't need to repeat that. I do think there is many space of progress that have been captured in Glasgow. Alok Sharma was talking about this number of initiative, voluntary coalition that where people, countries and companies in a way committed to progress on deforestation, on methane, on coal, etc. And I think if already we can make these countries to put that in their NDC, we will see already a difference in the trend and the commitment for the moment that are on the table. The second element is the call for having clear plans for how countries would get to that net zero by 2050, where they commit to, again, in the context of Glasgow, will send a very strong signal to the market. Nevertheless, of course, there is a short-term situation, and in particular, the hikes in price, in energy price. In a way, it's a very strong message for every government that relying on such volatile markets, how you can think about energy security and the security of your people when these commodities can have such ups and downs, and that the best way to be secure is to be autonomous. And the other solution is, of course, renewable energy. That's exactly the direction that UK has taken, some other countries have taken. And again, you have seen all the EU leaders these last days say the invasion of Russia in Ukraine is the best reason for us to accelerate the Green Deal, the European Green Deal, not to in a way, take time away. So I think that's a very important moment. We are almost in a war economy in Europe today, even if we are not all at war, but our colleagues, our brothers and sisters are at war in Ukraine. And the message is we should not say we have to go back to the fossil fuel dependency. At the contrary, the safety, the security is about getting rid of them.
So you're optimistic on the road to COP27 despite the challenges. And I know you've just come back from America, I think, or you headed there for this. And so that's interesting that you've come back with that positive view. Mafalda, can I turn to you? I think you see the perspective for the developing world being more challenging.
Yes, indeed. It's a little bit. It is quite good to hear Minister Sharma being with a message of hope, and I do think that it's important to carry a message of hope because this can be a great opportunity, as Laurence has said as well, to really pivot much more strongly to clean energy. But developing countries face really serious challenges. They were already facing serious challenges with COVID. They are now compounded. They were already suffering disproportionately from climate change, and now these compounded effects with the current war. And so we are already, I mean, of course, we do expect them to suffer from food price increases, oil price increases. We had already quite a number of credit rating downgrades of many of the countries, so the cost of borrowing going up. They were coming out of COVID with high debt levels, so very limited fiscal space. Now with the interest rate environment going up and the stronger U.S. is expected, a stronger U.S. dollar, it's going to be quite challenging to service that. And we are also seeing quite a bit of capital outflows already.
That's worrying. Is it from particular areas, the outflows?
The outflows, the capital outflows, no, it's an exit from the stock and bond markets in emerging markets. Yep. And we have seen in previous crises as well that when we have, we have the clear example, we were established on the back of the 2008 financial crisis. And we were capable and able with the type of finance that we provided to developing countries to attract back private capital flows. But there had been, an outflow of private capital from developing countries and emerging markets. So, I mean, the message that I can convey based on our own experience is a message that we really need solidarity now. We need enhanced solidarity with developing countries. We really need to maintain the momentum on climate action, because maintaining this momentum on climate action can actually provide for the recovery to COVID and can really help absorb or deal with these compounded effects of the current crisis, which is still unfolding, and it's still to see how it's going to play out fully. But this is the power of public finance and climate finance. When we are able to provide capital that is more patient, more longer term, that can take higher risk, can be more concessional or below market rates, we can provide it at a certain scale and actually bring key partners together. We have from the beginning been pioneering this model of bringing the multilateral development banks together with other development partners in country and private sector and civil society, and under the leadership of the governments, really driving a strategic agenda of investments. We see things happening that in 2008, 2009, nobody thought was necessarily possible on the back of a financial crisis and where the climate agenda was at the time. So we are a proof, and the work of all of our partners, multilateral development banks and others, that it is possible. And so I think what will be important in the context of the upcoming COP is really to find a way to show ambition on climate finance, on development finance and climate finance.
When you say show ambition, what are you looking for in particular, if there's one thing that you could pinpoint?
Look, honoring commitments that have been made in the past and finding additional ways of providing finance to developing countries. But I think, we are at a point in time as well, and I know that there's a lot of work being done by several institutions. We are ourselves exploring that as well. What more can we do to use the scarce public capital to really mobilize the private capital? So I think this is an agenda. We talk a lot about it. We keep talking about it, but we really need concrete mechanisms and structures being put in place to really achieve much larger scale of investments.
So I want to ask Dr. Rania a question about mobilization of finance, but would an example of what you're talking about be the, I think, a little discussed, slightly overlooked achievement at COP26, which was the $8.5 billion deal with South Africa to help South Africa transition from coal-reliant economy? Is that the kind of objective that you're referring to?
I would hope to see a few more of those, because I think that would really provide this confidence that developed countries are committed and will be behind developing countries in ambitious partnerships, driving in the particular case clean energy transition, coal transition, but it could be in other areas as well. So I think it's a really good example of what I particularly highlight in that partnership, which is something new that we hadn't necessarily seen yet, is developed countries coming together with the government of South Africa and committing politically to work together towards an objective, and doing whatever they can to achieve that objective. It's not going to be immediate, it's not going to be done in 1 year, it's going to take time, but that level of political commitment that will then be backed up by investments and other initiatives, I think is very important.
So, Dr. Rania, it's all going to be on you in 6 months' time. Well, on you collectively, the cabinet in Egypt. Can you talk a little bit about how you see Egypt being able to deliver some of these objectives?
Well, let me first start by saying there's a lot of collaboration between the UK presidency and the Egyptian presidency. We had Minister Alec in Egypt with his team, as well as the UK champion, Nigel Topping, with his team. Let me just give the audience a little bit on the governance structure of how the Egypt's presidency is being modeled. We have the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who's the COP27 president. We have a champion, Dr. Mahmoud Mohiuddin, who's also the UN envoy on SDGs. And then we have a Supreme Council for Climate, which is led by the Prime Minister. And then you have the line ministries, including myself, each working on the different files on topics, be it financing, be it the green transition when it comes to transportation, electricity, agriculture, and water being very important in our case as well. Of course, the Glasgow was in my view, one of the very practical COPs, if you will. Stakeholders were there, everybody was included, and as was mentioned, the private sector being present at the table, giving these commitments was a very important message. What we want to do in COP27 is to continue that, but we want to go from commitments to action, or from commitments to implementation. I'll get back to some of the points that were mentioned. And the other very important element, Egypt being in Africa, adaptation and resilience come up very much. And if we look at the global backdrop today, with what's happening on food security, food prices, commodity prices, it even makes it more urgent and more important to focus on and try and see how we can push that agenda forward. And then, of course, comes the point on finance. And, there are two items here. One, I will talk on the South Africa deal and how we can replicate that. But the other is, in order to be able to use the mobilized financing on the ground, private capital will not come to any country where there's risk. And most of the countries that need the financing the most are rated B and below. That's now, before what we are going to see maybe next week and the week after, as the political situation unfolds even further, and everyone realizes that it's really a systemic emerging market risk that's really coming up in scales that maybe we have not seen in a long time. So how are we able to really create a compelling story, a compelling toolkit for this private sector to come into the countries that need it the most? And here we need stakeholder engagement. Multilateral development banks need to come in with concessional financing, but in a framework, within a framework that is understood by the private sector, by the governments. Everyone has a role to play. And here I will give the example of Egypt, because over the past 7 years, we have had a green transition. Maybe not everyone knows about it, but reforms have been taken on the prices of fuel. We were one of the countries that subsidized fuel for consumers and firms in a very big way. That created price distortions. That was removed. And then we started to put together a plan to move to renewables, which included feed-in tariffs for the private sector and so forth. So today we have 20% of our electricity mix coming from renewables. This was done and made possible through cooperation with the international community. We did not get grants, but we had development finance, low-cost financing, in addition to the public finance. And we also had private sector engagement because of the structural reforms that took place. So we want to say that here's a country, middle income, put together a plan whether it's on green transportation, on renewables, on agriculture, water waste management plants, because we are water deficient, so we're trying to make sure that each and every drop is maintained and utilized and used. So we can take our situation with the reforms that took place and the projects that have been implemented through public finance, through private-public partnerships, and with concessional money, to actually say we can provide South-South cooperation, South-South examples to other emerging markets or to the countries in Africa. So this is one item that stands out. But we need, one of the initiatives we're working on is to create an international framework where whatever the pledge is, and we can sit down and debate, and I think OECD and others are going to see how much of the 100 billion is really green finance and how much is it for SDGs and how much is it just, not related to climate.
Just see the 100 billion, that would be good.
Yeah, whatever, whatever that. But now, US envoy says from billions to trillions, so there's even trillions being mentioned, but we really need to see whatever is being pledged on projects on the ground. The excuses you always hear: projects are not bankable, countries don't have the capacity. But it's on all of us to work together to be able to operationalize this. Of course, what's happening today in the world, and the verdict is still out. Yes, we need to accelerate the green transition, but I'm sure with some of the financing issues that will show up, we want to make sure that we do not derail from a very important agenda. And I think one of the successes of Glasgow was that there has become more awareness among the public and the firms of the importance of the climate agenda. It's no longer an afterthought. It's really entrenched in what governments are talking about, private sectors are talking about, and even citizens. One last thing on the South Africa example. In our case, given the presidency, we have finalized our 2050 climate strategy. Within it, there's a list of projects till 2050 on adaptation and mitigation and so forth. And we will be also announcing our NDC sometime in May. And this would also provide an example for other countries at our level of development that can do the same. And we're trying to mobilize a deal similar to the South African deal with our bilateral and multilateral partners to basically, again, link these projects to the goals which are going to be very important for the climate agenda globally, nationally and globally.
So I think we're at the point, the show me the money part of the action leading from pledges. Alec, can I return to you? Can you see another South Africa deal emerging between now and COP27?
Well, that's certainly the hope and expectation. That's what we're working on. And I mean, I think that just to go back to this point that your colleagues have made is that this 100 billion is actually totemic, and that's why it's very important for us that we put in place a delivery plan ahead of COP26. But the reality is that unless you are able to leverage the private sector, I'm afraid you're not going to see the level of energy transition or clean growth that we need to see across the world. I mean, it's as simple as that. And that's why one of the other things that emerged at COP26 was this Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero that Mark Carney and other colleagues have led on, where there is a commitment from private assets representing, I think, around $130 trillion thus far to go to net zero. So there is a wall of money out there. The issue then is that how do you connect that to climate resilient projects in developing economies? And this, I think, has been one of the big issues over the past years. Everybody talks about the fact there's trillions, but actually, when I talk to people in developing nations, they say to me, well, never mind the trillions, we're not even seeing the millions. And one of the things that I think we did see with the South Africa deal was a bunch of sovereigns coming together. So we had the UK and France and Germany and the US, the EU coming together and putting together a package of finance which includes grants, it includes concessional loans, it includes guarantees, private investments, and bringing that all together. The reason I think we were able to do that is because actually South Africa also really stepped up to the plate with a really ambitious 2030 emission reduction targets and a willingness to reform the energy sector. I've just come back from Vietnam and Indonesia. And again, those are two countries which, have got a lot of growth to come in their economies. They're going to have to see a big expansion in terms of their energy needs. They are very keen to tap into renewables, into offshore, into solar. I think absolutely, if we can work with other countries together with MDBs as well, I think it is entirely possible to put together additional deals going into COP27. But what it will need is for those countries that effectively are beneficiaries of such a deal, what it will require, of course, is for those countries to also be ambitious in terms of their emission reduction targets, for them to look to reform, for instance, their energy sectors, so that when the private sector invests, there is a revenue mechanism that is in place which will allow them to get a positive return, also the confidence that actually the regulatory regime is going to be stable over a long period of time. And I think one of the things that certainly I've been pushing, and I know others have been doing the same, is that I think there's a real role here for the MDBs to step up. So, the private sector is keen to invest, but I think there are certain projects, there will be certain countries where they will need to have some sort of first lot facility which is available. I think the MDBs personally have a big role to play in stepping up and providing those sort of facilities. So, I think during this year, what we are doing is working with developed country partners and others to ensure that, yes, there are more South Africa type deals. But I can tell you, the South Africa deal, there was a huge willingness on everyone's part. It still took us, very many months to get it over the line. And now it needs to be operationalized. So it's not an easy task, but I think there is a willingness on the part of developing nations to, accept this kind of deal. And there's a willingness on the part of developed countries to provide it. We just need to make sure that the two match up over the coming 8-9 months.
Laurence, you've heard a lot of promises made about money over the years, and as we've heard, we can't get the 100 billion. We've got the 130 trillion that's been promised by the financial institutions has sort of become almost a pejorative term in finance lately. People make a joke about, oh yes, have you got 130 trillion? How do we, with Alex's best intentions and efforts, how do we actually get to the point of this commitment? Does it mean, Alex refers to the MDBs stepping up, it sort of seems to require everybody stepping up, but the private capital still doesn't quite get into the projects.
One, first of all, as Alex said, I think the 100 billion, we can get there more quicker if really, in particular, the board members sitting in the different multilateral banks do the job, and that they mobilize them. Just we close that gap that is totally possible to close. So that first. On the very interesting experience of trying finally to back up plans that are detailed and serious enough so they can infuse confidence. We know that if countries doesn't address this problem of climate change, they will face a number of risks, not only impact, but as well, of course, and more impact. So there is an element of the assessment of risk in the financial community, both public and private, that seems really to find at least a method. As Alex said, it's not an easy one. It was because the South African country has planned and proposed with a very inclusive process, a plan that finally has given the security for the donors to come and not to have their own agenda, which was very important, but to support the agenda of the government. And in a way, with a quite inclusive, again, process that the South Africa president has started. I think that is the security we need because he is backing that plan, and we need that backing at that level of the government. And if in many cases the climate plans were on the side of government, we are never central to that. So that's why this just energy transition plan that in particular our Egypt colleagues are trying to promote is really the good way to start. And there is a number of countries preparing that. I hope we will see, as Martha said, a number of them at least started, at least a discussion started at Sharm. It will be the good sign that for now, that the financial community is coming together, and that we will make, in a way, the commitments of the 130 billion real if finally some private capital is really coming back in that new setting. And even the philanthropy can help, in a way, trying to prepare and to help for preparing this project. So there is a combination of actors that have very different roles with very different level of funding, but that can make this happen. And the case of South Africa was exactly this one, where philanthropy came to prepare and to help whenever the South Africans were ready, and they need resources to invest in this, which was particularly a plan. And that's a combination of these actors can at least make this community serious for now. I hope that the G7 led by Germany will deliver a number of strong messages to that, because as you said, the debt crisis, which I think we have to deal with very, very urgently. The problem of the food prices, which are really worrying, as well as the energy prices. The shock on the economy has to be absorbed in a way, and that is very, very challenging in my view. Mm-hmm. But the good solution is not to go to try to compensate, and congratulations to Egypt to have done that on the fossil fuel subsidies, because that was the right decision to take.
Thank you for that. In fact, the talk of the private sector coming into COP, if you like, that leads to a question from the audience here, which I have on my tablet, which I'll put to you. But it sort of goes slightly to COP becoming like a Davos-style event, and the private capital having an increasing presence there. And the question from the audience was, Richard Oblath has posed this, will COP27 invite the international oil companies who have committed to net zero by 2050? They were uninvited just before COP26. I don't know whether, Alec, you want to take that, as you still have the hat, and we still have the baton of the presidency.
Well, obviously, we don't have the baton for COP27, so I think I will let the minister answer for Egypt. Look, I mean, I didn't think our intention certainly wasn't to exclude anyone. What we said was that for any corporate to participate in presidency level events, we required companies to have signed up to science-based targets to Race to Zero campaign. And that was the basis on which we sort of decided, who would get a platform in terms of the presidency events that we held. And it's just worth pointing out, I mean, we've got over 50% of the FTSE 100, which has signed up to net zero. So, I mean, this isn't a sort of a trickle. There has been a flood of corporates, not just in the UK, but around the world, that have moved forward on this issue. But, I mean, in terms of COP27, I think that's for the minister.
Minister?
Well, before I answer that question, can I just go back to the stepping up the MDBs? So I'm also Egypt's governor at the EBRD, at the World Bank, and other MDBs, and the spring meetings are coming up. And I think that when we talk about an international framework where we can mobilize, really see the private capital coming in, de-risking, you always see blended mentioned in statements from Development Committee or from the IMFC. So we want to really operationalize as much as possible how we can provide practical ways of doing it. And why I mentioned the Egypt story, why do we have a Ministry of International Cooperation? Our portfolio with the MDBs and the bilaterals is close to $26 billion, and we mobilized in 2020 and 2021 an additional $20 billion. So this is why we exist as a ministry, and in that financing, to SDG number 13, there's $12 billion already, and they are in mitigation projects and adaptation projects, which provide very practical examples that can be replicated or scaled up in other countries. So I just wanted to say that when we say a framework to go from commitments to action, we want to show ourselves in a particular way of saying we were able to de-risk, we were able to bring in private sector, but we need to show other countries how to do it, and that needs the collective effort of all stakeholders, governments, private sector, and the MDBs. On the oil companies, this is a discussion that we are having, but on the back of all private sector companies today, including oil and gas, that have ESG metrics. So this is another discussion which we need to also bring in, whether it's, everybody has, and there's no consensus yet on which metric should be used. I think the World Economic Forum has one, the International Business Council has one, different institutions have one, but there needs to also be convergence there, because whether it's going to be within the financing framework or whether it's going to be to convince MDBs to put their money, concessional part, with firms, that could be another very important tool to push the climate agenda forward.
So the answer on whether the oil companies get invited is...
Well,
it depends on them.
Well, again, there's a lot of preparation going into how COP27 will shape up. But I think, in general, the concept of an inclusive process and everybody being included is one that we will follow from Glasgow.
Okay, all right, good. So we'll hopefully also civil societies and also to balance out the diversification, if that's a word. We have another question from Francis McGuire. Since the majority of emissions on a per capita basis come from high-income countries, how can investment in the global north be used to reduce consumption of energy, material resources, and still maintain standards of living? Laurence, I'm going to put that on you. So, how do we cut back? We've seen in the EU this week recommendations of all kinds of things to do with insulation, better efficiency of housing, also potentially that we cap our thermostat. So do you think turning down the thermostat and putting on a jumper and driving a different speed will get us there?
Well, these are short-term solutions to try to stop oil and gas imports from Russia. That's what this short-term action and individual action are part of. And because we are in a totally particular situation, again, I said we are not at war with Russia, but we are already in an economy of war. So it's different. It's like, and we have seen in the past how the fossil fuel crisis have led to this very strong decision that even people has to take for themselves. So this voluntary action and really mobilizing citizens in front of this war is very, very important. Then the future of a decarbonized economy is not this one. The future of decarbonized economy is really to change heavily the way we work. That's all the purpose of the Green Deal in Europe. And it is really about having a zero steel industry, the same for chemicals, the same for transport, the same for all the sectors, has to really accelerate now a technological revolution. But at the same time, that's true, we have to think about our overconsumption. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a thinking that is coming progressively, in particular because of the COVID crisis. People have been thinking more about what has happened, what kind of relation they have with nature. And we see evolutions in many countries of Europe where you see meat consumption going down without any sort of forcing mechanism to do it, just consciousness and concern about weather health. And you see that now more and more people try to, when they live in cities, not to drive a car. So we see evolution of the society that respond to some trends in the behaviors, but as well the consciousness of what is happening. Is this going fast enough? No. That's why we need a number of legislation and very strong policies to get us there, which is minus 55 for Europe, but minus 50% more or less by 2030 globally.
So I think I think that's you, Alec, in terms of policies that are coming down the pipeline to reduce consumption. Is it something we can, as the EU has proposed, that we can expect the UK to propose?
Well, I think I said at the start of the discussion that there is an energy plan that the government is putting together, and I'm sure that'll be published soon, and we can have a discussion around that.
Okay. So we're nearly at the end. I have someone with their hand up, and then we're going to go a little bit over time, I think. Is that okay, Alex? It's a little okay.
Thank you very much, and thanks very much to the panelists. Alok, just on behalf of probably everybody here, we knew your incredible commitment at COP26, and we're all incredibly, incredibly proud of you. Thank you for it. And I was in COP26 at the end in the last session, and I felt your pain as that last pact was watered down in a number of areas which were vital. So thank you so much for your work on it. Mafalda talked about maintaining momentum on climate action. And I just wanted to talk about keeping up that momentum, and particularly talking to Alok here. I had a meeting about a week ago with a gentleman called Steve Baker, the hard man of Brexit, for about an hour and a half, talking about climate action. And Steve does not believe that there actually is a climate emergency. So he doesn't believe there's a climate emergency, and he believes we should get fracking, get all our oil pumped out the ground and everything else. And obviously that's part of the net zero scrutiny group that is now formed amongst the Conservative members of Parliament. I'm a member of the Conservative Environmental Network, and I know that the Conservative Environmental Network has the opposite opinion. And all I'm saying is, if we're going to maintain the momentum now and on our way to COP27, is that group going to be a problem? How is it going to be dealt with, if it is, in order that we can keep up the momentum?
I'll take it that's directed at me. Look, firstly, thank you very much for your kind words about COP26. I mean, it was a big team effort from the UK. Look, I mean, I can't speak for other individual colleagues and parliamentarians, but I just say that actually, as a party, the Conservatives have actually led on this agenda over a long period of time. And now take you back to Margaret Thatcher, who I think was one of the first international figures to raise the alarm on climate change at the UN all those years ago. And if you have a look at the commitments that have been made under the Conservative government, obviously, as I talked about, the net zero by 2050 commitment, our own NDC, which is something that I worked on very closely when I was business secretary, and then, of course, our latest carbon budget. I mean, all of those are world leading. And if you have a look at what we have achieved over let's look at the last 30 years. We've managed to cut emissions by over 40%, and yet grow the economy by around 80%. So I think we are seen around the world as a poster child for green growth. I think that's what we want to see going forward. And we've kind of got to the point where, yes, of course, there will be sort of differing views, but the mainstream view, I think, in the country is pretty aligned when it comes to civil society, when it comes to business, and when it comes to our sort of politics, which is that this is the direction that we need to go towards, which is making sure that we're generating high value-added jobs at the same time as cutting emissions. I mean, I've made this point a number of times recently that actually by ensuring that we go to net zero by 2050, we're going to be able to have both an economic as well as an environmental dividend. And you see the net zero strategy that the government published at the end of last year. That is all about ensuring that, yes, we are cutting emissions, but at the same time, we've got another 400,000 jobs coming through. We've got £90 billion worth of inward investment coming in from the private sector. And I think that is what should drive us forward in terms of the economics of this. And frankly, if we don't deal with this issue, the cost is going to be significantly higher further down the road. I mean, if you look at what the OBR sort of forecast in its risk report last year, talked about the fact that unmitigated climate change impacts will add another, I think, 289 percent of debt or of GDP to debt by the end of the century. I mean, you know, I'm a fiscally responsible conservative. I don't want that to happen. And we can see that if we get this right, we can have economic growth at the same time. So I think we have to keep making the rational argument why this is the right thing to do.
I think that's a good point on which to end, the rational argument about what the right thing to do is. I think that's what will be driving us towards COP27. I hope that the picture looks a little bit brighter by that time. And we could have gone for another 40 minutes, frankly. We have only really touched the top of all of these very big subjects. So thank you all for your time. Thank you, Alec. Feel better. Laurence, thank you again, as always. And to all of you in the room, thank you for your interest and your attention through these last couple of days. I now can announce that you can rush to the drinks table. I don't want to hold you back from the beverages and networking. And if you're online, please take the chance for a refreshment. A few notes for those who are here. Our stage is fully sustainable, including us, we're all sustainable. And the plants at the front of the stage are real, so if you'd like to take one home after you've had your drink, tuck one under your arm. Don't rush all at once to the front to get it. As you leave, please leave your badge for recycling. If you forget, please recycle the paper and keep the string bit, the lanyard. I don't have mine, it's over here. Yeah, so many instructions. And continuing the recycling theme, the event after this will resume online with a panel on the circular economy and its popularity with consumers and why we don't have more of these kinds of business models. Thank you for what's been quite a consequential time.